Stop playing hero. Sit down, 22C. The entire cabin erupted in laughter when she reviewed the safety card. Just another embarrassed woman in seat 22C. But when the plane lost navigation over the Atlantic, the sky froze. Air Force One heard her call sign, and everything changed. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The announcement echoed through Gate 47 at Washington Dulles International Airport. Now boarding all passengers for Flight 437 to London Heathrow. This is a full flight. Please have your boarding passes ready. Emma Reed stood in line, her small rolling suitcase beside her. She was 29 years old, average height, with shoulder-length brown hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore jeans, a plain gray sweater, and comfortable sneakers. Nothing about her stood out. Nothing made anyone look twice. That was exactly how she wanted it. The boarding pass in her hand showed seat 22C, middle seat, the worst seat on any airplane, but Emma had chosen it deliberately. Middle seats were invisible seats. People in middle seats were forgettable. They squeezed between strangers and apologized for existing. Perfect. Emma had been living this way for 3 years now. Invisible, forgettable, just another face in the crowd. It was safer this way. Quieter, no questions, no attention. No memories she wanted to forget, but couldn't. The line moved forward slowly. Business travelers tapped impatiently on their phones. Families wrestled with car seats and diaper bags. A group of college students laughed too loudly about their upcoming semester abroad. Emma stayed silent. She always stayed silent. When she reached the gate agent, the woman barely looked at her, just scanned the boarding pass and waved her through. Emma walked down the jet bridge, her footsteps soft and careful. Even the way she walked was designed not to be noticed. The Boeing 767 was massive. Its wide body could hold nearly 300 passengers. Tonight it was completely full, every seat sold. Emma made her way down the narrow aisle, squeezing past passengers stuffing bags into overhead bins. Row 22, there it was. The window seat, 22A, was occupied by an elderly woman already asleep, her head resting against a neck pillow. The aisle seat, 22B, held a young man in his early 20s, wearing headphones, completely absorbed in his laptop screen. Emma lifted her small suitcase into the overhead bin. Then she squeezed into the middle seat, 22C. The young man didn't even look up. The elderly woman didn't stir. Perfect. Emma buckled her seatbelt and pulled out a worn paperback novel from her bag. She had read it 3 times already, but that didn't matter. The book was just a prop, something to look at so people wouldn't try to talk to her. Around her, the cabin filled with noise, conversations, crying babies, flight attendants making announcements, the beeping of seatbelt signs. Emma let it all wash over her like background music. But she was listening, always listening. Her ears picked up things other people missed. The slight change in air pressure as the cabin door sealed, the hydraulic hiss of the jet bridge pulling away, the different pitch in the captain's voice over the intercom compared to the usual pre-flight announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Michael Torres. Welcome aboard Flight 437 with service to London Heathrow. Our flight time today will be approximately 8 hours. We're currently second in line for takeoff, so we should be wheels up in about 10 minutes. Flight attendants, prepare for departure. Emma's eyes stayed on her book, but her attention was completely focused on the sounds around her, the engines spooling up, the gentle movement as the aircraft began to taxi, the familiar rhythm of pre-flight checks happening in the cockpit just 30 feet in front of her. The takeoff was smooth. The Boeing 767 accelerated down the runway, pushed back into her seat by the force, then lifted gracefully into the night sky. The lights of Washington, D.C. spread below them like a glowing carpet, then disappeared as they climbed into the clouds. Emma allowed herself one glance out the window, past the sleeping elderly woman. The wing lights blinked rhythmically against the darkness. Red on the left wing, green on the right, white strobes flashing at regular intervals. Then she returned to her book, turning pages at appropriate intervals, while her mind tracked 1,000 other details. The flight leveled off at 37,000 feet. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Passengers unbuckled and stretched. Flight attendants began rolling drink carts down the aisles. Emma ordered water. Just water. She didn't want alcohol clouding her senses. Didn't want coffee keeping her artificially alert. Just water. The young man beside her in 22B ordered a whiskey and Coke, He still hadn't looked at her once. The elderly woman in 22A woke briefly, declined refreshments, then went back to sleep. 2 hours into the flight, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, the turbulence started. It wasn't unusual. Atlantic crossings often had rough patches, the plane shook, overhead bins rattled, drinks sloshed in cups. The seatbelt sign chimed back on. Most passengers barely noticed. This was normal flying, but Emma noticed something different. The turbulence pattern was wrong. It wasn't the random buffeting of weather. It was too rhythmic, too specific. And underneath it, she could hear something in the engine noise that didn't belong. Her hand moved to the seat pocket in front of her. She pulled out the safety information card, the one that showed emergency exits, oxygen mask procedures, and evacuation routes. She had already memorized it during boarding, but she reviewed it again now, her eyes tracing the evacuation paths, counting rows to exits, noting which doors were overwing and which were full size. Planning to be a pilot now? The voice was loud, mocking. It came from across the aisle. Emma looked up. The man in seat 21A was staring at her with a smirk. He was in his mid-50s, wearing an expensive suit with the tie loosened. His face was red, probably from the 3 vodka tonics he'd already consumed. A businessman. The type who thought money made him important. His name, Emma would later learn, was Richard Hartwell, vice president of something at some company. The kind of man who talked loudly on phones about deals and never said please to flight attendants. "Excuse me?" Emma said quietly. "The safety card." Richard gestured at the card in her hands. "You studying to be a pilot or just nervous?" A few passengers nearby chuckled. The turbulence had made everyone tense. Finding someone to laugh at helped relieve the stress. "Just reviewing the safety information," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, safety information." Richard's voice grew louder, playing to his audience now. "Everyone, 22C is reviewing the safety information. Maybe she knows something we don't." More laughter, nervous laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the safety card. This was why she chose middle seats, why she stayed invisible. Because moments like this hurt, even when you knew they shouldn't. "Sit down, 22C," Richard continued, clearly enjoying himself now. "Leave the flying to the professionals. You don't know anything about this stuff." Emma carefully placed the safety card back in the seat pocket, her head bowed, her hands folded in her lap. To everyone watching, she looked exactly like what they thought she was, an embarrassed woman who'd been put in her place. But something else was happening that none of them could see. Emma's eyes, downcast and seemingly ashamed, were actually tracking the emergency lighting strips along the floor. Her ears, tuned to frequencies most people couldn't perceive, were listening to radio chatter leaking through the cockpit door. Her fingers, folded so tightly in her lap, were counting seconds between engine vibrations. The young man in 22B finally looked at her. "Don't worry about him," he whispered. "Guy's been drinking since boarding." Emma nodded but said nothing. The elderly woman in 22A had woken up. She patted Emma's hand gently. "Some people are just rude, dear." Emma managed a small smile. "Thank you." But inside, her mind was racing. Because what she had heard in the last 30 seconds confirmed her suspicions. The navigation system was failing. Not completely, not yet, but degrading in a way that the pilots were probably just starting to notice. She had heard the first officer's voice, tense and low, saying something about cross-check the INS, inertial navigation system, the backup to GPS. She had heard the captain reply with something she couldn't quite make out, but his tone was worried. And underneath all of it, she heard something else, a frequency interference pattern that shouldn't exist, not at this altitude, not over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Emma pulled her paperback novel back out, pretended to read, and waited, because she knew what was coming next. She had been a pilot long enough to recognize the early signs of cascading system failure. It would start small, a navigation discrepancy, then cross-system errors, then full instrumentation failure, and out here, 1,500 miles from land in any direction, that could be fatal. 20 minutes passed. The cabin had settled back into the quiet rhythm of overnight flying. Most passengers were dozing. Some watched movies on their seatback screens. A few read or worked on laptops. Richard Hartwell in 2001A had stopped drinking and fallen asleep, his mouth hanging open, snoring softly. The flight attendants had finished the beverage service and were taking their rest positions in the jump seats. Everything seemed normal. Then the announcement came. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Torres. There was something in his voice, a tightness, a carefully controlled tension. Emma sat up straighter. We're experiencing some minor technical difficulties with our navigation systems. Nothing to be concerned about, but we may experience some additional turbulence as we work through the issue. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The cabin stirred. Passengers who had been sleeping woke up. Those watching movies pulled out their earbuds. A wave of whispered conversations rippled through the aircraft. Minor technical difficulties was pilot speak for something is wrong, but we don't want to panic you. Emma's hands gripped her armrests, not from fear, from the effort of staying seated. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to get up, to go to the cockpit, to help. But she had made a promise to herself 3 years ago, no more flying, no more military missions, no more being the person she used to be. Just Emma Reed, ordinary, invisible, safe. The minutes crawled by. The aircraft's path became less stable. Small banking movements to the left, then right. The kind of micro-corrections pilots make when they're troubleshooting navigation problems. Emma could feel it in her body. The slight changes in G-force, the subtle shifts in engine power. The aircraft was searching for its position, trying to correlate conflicting information from different systems. More passengers were waking up now. The nervous energy was contagious. Then the second announcement. This is Captain Torres. His voice was different now, still professional, still calm, but with an edge that couldn't be hidden. I need to inform you that we have lost contact with air traffic control, and our primary GPS navigation system has failed. We are currently operating on backup instruments and attempting to re-establish communication. Flight crew, prepare for possible emergency procedures. The cabin exploded. Passengers who had been calm seconds ago were now gripping armrests, eyes wide. Children started crying. Someone in the back of the plane screamed. The flight attendants jumped into action, moving through the aisles with practiced efficiency. But Emma could see the fear in their eyes, carefully hidden behind professional smiles. We're going to die, someone sobbed from a few rows back. We're lost over the ocean. Richard Hartwell in 21A was wide awake now, his face pale, all traces of smugness gone. He looked around wildly, as if searching for someone to fix this. His eyes landed on Emma. Where's your expertise now, 22C? His voice was shrill with panic. Think you can fix this with your little safety card? But Emma was already unbuckling her seatbelt. She stood up, calm and steady, while chaos erupted around her. The young man in 22B stared at her in confusion. The elderly woman in 22A grabbed her hand. Where are you going, dear? It's okay, Emma said softly. I need to help. She stepped into the aisle. Emma moved through the cabin with purpose, not hurried, not panicked. Just steady, deliberate steps toward the front of the aircraft. Passengers stared at her, some with confusion, some with hope, most with the desperate need to believe anyone knew what to do. A flight attendant intercepted her near the galley, Sarah Chen, according to her name tag. Her face was composed, but her hands were shaking. Ma'am, you need to return to your seat. We're in an emergency situation. Emma looked directly into Sarah's eyes. If I don't help, we're not making it to London. There was something in Emma's voice, something that made Sarah pause, not arrogance, not hysteria, just quiet certainty. Are you a pilot? Sarah asked. I was, Emma said. Let me talk to the captain. Before Sarah could respond, the cockpit door opened. First Officer David Kim emerged, his face drawn with exhaustion and stress. He'd been flying for 15 years, but he'd never faced complete navigation failure over the Atlantic. Behind him, through the open cockpit door, Emma could see Captain Torres hunched over the radio, cycling through frequencies, finding only static. Let me try, Emma said to David Kim. The first officer started to shake his head. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but only authorized personnel. Valkyrie. Emma said it quietly. Just one word. David Kim froze. That wasn't a commercial call sign, that was military. And not just any military call sign. Kim had served in the Air Force before going commercial. He'd heard whispers about Valkyrie, stories told in pilot lounges, legends about a ghost pilot who could navigate by starlight and communicate on frequencies that officially didn't exist. Someone who had flown protection for the highest level assets. Someone who had saved Air Force One itself, someone who had supposedly died 3 years ago. That's impossible, Kim whispered. Valkyrie is a legend? Emma finished. Someone who doesn't exist? Someone who died? She stepped past him and into the cockpit. Captain Torres turned around, startled. He saw a small woman in a gray sweater standing in his cockpit during a crisis, and his first instinct was to order her out. Then he saw her eyes, and something in those eyes made him hesitate. "Who are you?" Torres demanded. "Someone who can help," Emma said. She moved to the radio controls, her hands hovering over the equipment. "May I?" Torres and Kim exchanged glances. This was insane. Letting a passenger operate aircraft controls during an emergency. But they were 1,500 miles from land, with no navigation and no communications. Insane was relative. "If you can raise anyone on that radio," Torres said, "be my guest." Emma's fingers moved across the radio panel with the confidence of long practice. She bypassed the commercial aviation frequencies entirely. Her hands found controls that most civilian pilots never used. Military channels, emergency protocols, frequencies that required security clearances most people would never see. She keyed the microphone. When she spoke, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the quiet, hesitant tone of the embarrassed passenger from 22C. In its place was something else entirely: crisp, authoritative. The voice of someone who had commanded respect at 40,000 feet while lives hung in the balance. "Any station? Any station? This is Valkyrie requesting immediate assistance. We have a civilian aircraft, Boeing 767, complete navigation failure, estimated position 1,500 miles east of Newfoundland over the Atlantic, requesting escort and guidance to nearest suitable airport, 287 souls on board. How copy?" The cockpit fell silent. The only sounds were the hum of electronics and the distant crying of frightened passengers. Torres and Kim stared at Emma like they were seeing a ghost. The radio crackled with static. 5 seconds passed, 10, 15, then a voice responded, deep, authoritative, carrying the kind of respect reserved for people who had earned it in blood and fire. "Valkyrie, this is Razor 1, U.S. Air Force. Confirm your last transmission." "Confirm you are Valkyrie. We were told you were KIA 3 years ago. How copy?" Emma's hand was steady on the microphone. "Razor 1, this is Valkyrie. Very much alive. Currently flying commercial. I say again, we have a civilian 767 with navigation failure and no communications. I need immediate escort and guidance to Gander International. Can you assist?" There was a pause. Then, "Valkyrie, Razor 1. Stand by for escort package. We are vectoring 4 F-22s to your position. Estimate intercept in 12 minutes. Eagle 1 has been advised of your situation." Emma closed her eyes briefly. Eagle 1. That was the call sign for Air Force One, the president's aircraft. Which meant this was about to get much bigger than a simple navigation failure. Razor 1, Valkyrie copies. Standing by for escort. She set down the microphone and turned to face Torres and Kim. Both men were staring at her with expressions of complete shock. "You're actually Valkyrie," Torres said. It wasn't a question. It was someone trying to process an impossibility. "I was Valkyrie," Emma corrected quietly. "That was a long time ago." "What are you doing flying commercial in a middle seat?" Kim asked. "Trying to disappear," Emma said. "Didn't work out very well, did it?" Before either pilot could respond, the radio crackled again. "Valkyrie, this is Eagle 1. Emma's hand went back to the microphone, but she didn't pick it up immediately, because she recognized that voice. Colonel James Mitchell. The president's personal pilot. One of the few people who knew exactly who Valkyrie had been. One of the few people who knew what she had done during the Battle of Grey Zone. One of the few people who knew why she had disappeared. She picked up the microphone. "Eagle 1, this is Valkyrie. Valkyrie," Mitchell's voice carried, 3 years of grief and relief in a single word. "We thought you were gone. Welcome back." Emma felt something crack in her chest, something she had kept carefully sealed for 3 years. "Eagle 1, I'm just trying to get some passengers home safely." "Copy that, Valkyrie. But when this is done, we need to talk. There are a lot of people who will want to know you're alive." "Understood, Eagle 1. Can we focus on the navigation problem first?" Affirmative. Razor package will be with you in 10 minutes. We're clearing Gander for emergency landing. Medical and fire teams standing by. You'll have every resource we can throw at you. Thank you, Eagle One. Valkyrie out. Emma set down the microphone and turned back to Torres and Kim. Okay, she said, her voice shifting back to something more conversational but still carrying authority. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get a military escort. 4 F-22 Raptors. They'll guide us to Gander International in Newfoundland. I'll translate their instructions into language you can use. You'll still be in command of the aircraft, Captain Torres. I'm just here to bridge the communication gap. Torres nodded slowly. Who are you really? Emma considered the question. 3 years ago, I was an electronic warfare specialist with a classified unit. My job was to protect high-value assets during sensitive missions. I flew escort for Air Force One, among others. Then, something went wrong on a mission, and I lost my entire squadron. I survived. They didn't. So I retired and tried to become someone else. But tonight, 287 people need me to be Valkyrie again. So that's who I'll be. Just for tonight. The word spread through military communication networks like wildfire. Valkyrie was alive. Valkyrie was airborne. Valkyrie had called for help on emergency military frequencies. In command centers from Norfolk to Colorado Springs, duty officers who had only heard the name in whispered stories suddenly found themselves coordinating an escort mission for a ghost. At Gander International Airport in Newfoundland, the emergency response team mobilized in record time: fire trucks, ambulances, airport authority vehicles, Canadian military liaison officers, American diplomatic personnel. Everyone wanted to be part of the night Valkyrie came back from the dead. Back in the cockpit of Flight 437, Emma worked with Torres and Kim to establish their exact position using the limited backup instruments they had available. Without GPS, they were relying on inertial navigation systems and basic calculations. It was old-school flying, the kind most modern pilots rarely practiced. But Emma had trained for this. In her previous life, she had flown missions where GPS was deliberately jammed, where navigation had to be done by stars, by calculations, by instinct. Based on our last known position and our ground speed, I estimate we're here. She pointed to a spot on the navigation chart. About 1,600 miles from Gander. Torres checked her math. It matched his own calculations. How did you get that so fast? Practice, Emma said simply. The radio crackled. Valkyrie, Razor 1, we have visual on your aircraft. Beginning escort approach. Emma looked out the cockpit window. And there they were. 4 F-22 Raptors, the most advanced fighter jets in the American arsenal, materializing out of the darkness like gray ghosts. They took up formation around the civilian aircraft, 2 on each side, their position lights glowing against the black Atlantic night. Captain Torres had been flying for 22 years, but he had never seen anything like this. Military fighters escorting a civilian aircraft over the Atlantic. It was unprecedented, surreal, like something from a movie. How did you do that? He asked Emma, his voice filled with awe. How did you just call in the Air Force? I didn't call in the Air Force. I called for help using frequencies I was authorized to use in emergencies. The Air Force responded because they recognized my call sign and knew I wouldn't use it unless lives were at stake. First Officer Kim was staring at the F-22s through the side window. Those are Raptors, top-tier fighters. They don't scramble for just anyone. They scramble for Valkyrie, Emma said quietly. Or at least they used to. I wasn't sure they still would. In the cabin behind them, the mood had shifted dramatically. Passengers who had been crying in terror minutes ago were now taking photos and videos of the fighter jets. The images would soon flood social media, though none of them understood yet what they were witnessing. A businessman in first class was on his phone trying to explain to someone what was happening. I'm telling you, there are 4 military jets flying next to us. No, I'm not making it up. Look at Twitter. A mother held her young daughter up to the window. See, honey? Those are the good guys. They're here to help us. The little girl pressed her hand against the glass. Are they like superheroes? Something like that, her mother whispered. In row 15, a retired Air Force colonel named Robert Drake sat upright in his seat. He had heard the announcement about the woman from 22C helping with communications. He had seen the military escort arrive, and now pieces were clicking together in his mind. Valkyrie, he had heard that name before, years ago. classified briefings, whispered stories in officer clubs, a ghost pilot who flew protection for the president, someone who could do things with an aircraft that seemed impossible. But Valkyrie was supposed to be dead. Colonel Drake unbuckled his seatbelt and made his way forward, ignoring the protests of flight attendants. He reached row 22 just as Emma stepped out of the cockpit for a brief moment to check on the cabin. Their eyes met. Drake saluted, a crisp, formal military salute in the middle of a civilian aircraft. "Ma'am," he said, "Colonel Robert Drake, retired. I just wanted to say it's an honor." Emma hesitated, then returned the salute. "At ease, Colonel. Just doing what needed to be done." "You're Valkyrie," Drake said. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded slowly. Drake's eyes filled with emotion. "My son was in the Air Force. He talked about you. Said you were the best pilot he'd ever seen. He wanted to fly like you someday." "What's your son's name?" Emma asked gently. "Lieutenant Marcus Drake. He died 2 years ago. Training accident." Emma's face softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, Colonel. He would have loved to know you're still out there," Drake said. Still saving lives. The elderly woman in 2002A had been listening. She reached out and touched Emma's arm. "You're very brave, dear." Emma shook her head. "I'm just doing my job." "No," the woman said firmly. "Brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared. I saw your hands shaking when that man mocked you, but you still stood up when we needed you." Emma felt a lump in her throat. She nodded, unable to speak. The young man in 22B finally spoke up. "I owe you an apology. I ignored you this whole flight. Didn't even look at you. I judged you as just another passenger, someone not worth noticing." "Most people are worth noticing," Emma said quietly. "We just don't always take the time to look." She returned to the cockpit, where Torres and Kim were maintaining their course under the guidance of the F-22 escort. "Everything okay back there?" Torres asked. "Yeah," Emma said, "just realizing that hiding doesn't really work. People see you eventually." The radio crackled again. This time it was a different voice. Older, more authoritative. "Valkyrie, this is Guardian Actual." Emma's hand froze on the way to the microphone. Guardian Actual. That was General Richard Stromberg, commander of Air Combat Command, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Air Force. She picked up the microphone with a hand that trembled slightly. "Guardian Actual, this is Valkyrie. Go ahead." "Valkyrie, I'm glad you're alive. We've been monitoring this situation. I want you to know you have every resource we can provide. Whatever you need, it's yours." "Thank you, sir. The escort package is more than sufficient." There was a pause. Then, "Emma, off the record for a moment. Why did you disappear?" Emma glanced at Torres and Kim. They were pretending not to listen, but she knew they were hanging on every word. "I lost my whole team, sir. 8 pilots. Best friends. They died completing the mission while I survived. I couldn't face that anymore." "They died doing their duty," Stromberg said, "just like you would have done for them. Survivor's guilt is real, Emma. But so is survivor's purpose. You're proving that tonight." "Yes, sir. When this is over, I'd like to talk about your future. No pressure, no obligations. Just a conversation." "Understood, sir. Guardian Actual, out." Emma set down the microphone and let out a long breath. Torres looked at her. "That was a 4-star general, wasn't it? Talking to you like you're his equal." "I'm not his equal," Emma said. "But in my previous life, I did work that required direct communication with senior leadership." "What exactly did you do?" Kim asked. Emma thought about how to answer. "I protected high-value assets during sensitive operations. Air Force One, diplomatic flights, covert insertions. Anything that needed an extra layer of security in the air." "And you were good at it," Torres said. "I was alive at the end of most missions," Emma replied. "That's the only measure that matters." Razor 1. Valkyrie has visual. "Thanks for the company." "Our pleasure, ma'am. We've got you now." "Relay to the captain, come left to heading 285, descend to flight level 350. Gander is rolling out the red carpet for you." Emma translated the military instruction into civilian language for Torres. He made the course correction smoothly, and the F-22s adjusted with him, maintaining perfect formation. In the cabin, passengers had pressed their faces to windows, staring in awe at the military fighters that had appeared from nowhere. The crying had stopped, the panic had subsided, replaced by something else: hope. wonder. The realization that whatever was happening, they were now under the protection of the United States military. Flight attendant Sarah Chen moved through the cabin, answering questions as best she could. Why are there fighter jets? Are we in danger? Who called them? Sarah didn't have all the answers, but she had seen Emma walk into the cockpit, had seen the change in the pilot's demeanor afterward, had heard fragments of radio communication that didn't make sense. She knew that somehow the quiet woman from 22C had saved them all. Back in the cockpit, Emma continued her work. She coordinated between the military escort and the civilian pilots, translated complex navigation data, provided running updates to both the aircraft and ground stations. She had become the bridge between two worlds, the invisible link holding everything together. Valkyrie, this is Razor 1. Permission to ask a question, ma'am? Emma smiled slightly. Go ahead, Razor 1. Where have you been, ma'am? We've got a lot of young pilots who wanted to learn from the legend. Emma's smile faded. Just trying to live quietly, Razor 1. Some of us weren't meant for the spotlight. Copy that, ma'am. But if it helps, what you did at Gray Zone, saving Eagle 1, it's still taught at the Academy. You saved more than one airplane that night. Emma's hand tightened on the microphone. Gray Zone. The name still hurt. The mission that had ended with her entire squadron shot down. 8 pilots, 8 friends. Dead because they had stayed to protect Air Force One while Emma had drawn the enemy fighters away. She had completed the mission. The president had landed safely, but the cost had been 8 funerals that she couldn't attend because her identity was classified. 8 families who didn't know why their sons and daughters had died. 8 ghosts that followed her every night when she tried to sleep. Razor 1, let's focus on the present situation. Understood, ma'am. Gander is 1 hour out. Weather is good. Runways clear. Full emergency response ready. The next hour passed in focused concentration. Emma worked with Torres and Kim to prepare for landing. They reviewed emergency procedures, discussed potential complications, planned for every contingency. The passengers had settled into a strange calm. The presence of the military escort had transformed their fear into something else. A sense of being part of something bigger, something historic. Flight attendant Sarah Chen moved through the cabin, checking on passengers. She stopped at row 22. I need to know, Sarah said to Emma, what really happened 3 years ago? Why did everyone think you were dead? Emma looked up from her notebook. It's classified. Try me. Emma sighed. There was a mission. Eastern Europe. We were protecting Air Force One during a diplomatic flight. Enemy forces somehow detected us. Started shooting. My squadron engaged to protect the president while I drew the fighters away. All 8 of my teammates were shot down, but they bought enough time for Air Force One to reach friendly airspace. And you? I survived. Barely. Ejected over hostile territory. Spent 3 days evading capture before Special Forces pulled me out. When I got back, I couldn't face it anymore. Couldn't face the families, the funerals, the questions about why I lived when they didn't. So I faked my death and disappeared. Sarah sat down in the empty seat across the aisle. That's a heavy burden to carry. It got lighter when I stopped flying, Emma said. Or so I thought. Turns out you can't really escape who you are. I'm glad you couldn't, Sarah said. We'd all be in serious trouble right now if you had. Back in first class, Richard Hartwell had been sitting in silence for the past hour. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated. He kept replaying his mockery of Emma in his mind, cringing at every word. The woman next to him noticed his distress. You okay? I'm the guy who made fun of her, Richard said quietly. I humiliated her in front of everyone. Called her 22C like she was nobody. And she just saved all our lives. So apologize when we land. An apology seems pretty inadequate. It's a start, the woman said. Better than sitting here feeling sorry for yourself. The F-22 escort maintained perfect formation, a constant reassuring presence in the darkness. Inside the lead Raptor, Captain Jake Razor Morrison was having the flight of his life. He was 32 years old, one of the Air Force's top fighter pilots, but even he had never expected to fly escort for a legend. Razor 2? You getting all this on your recorder? He asked his wingman. Affirm, Razor 1. This is going in the squadron history book. We're escorting Valkyrie, Razor said, almost to himself. My flight instructor used to tell stories about her. Said she could make an aircraft do things that defied physics. Think the stories are true? We're about to find out. As they approached Newfoundland, the first lights appeared on the horizon. The coast of Canada. Land. Safety. Valkyrie Razor 1. Gander Tower. Has you on radar. Will break off escort at 50 miles. It's been an honor flying with you, ma'am. The honor was mine, Razor 1. Thank you for the assist. Anytime, Valkyrie. Anytime. Razor flight, break formation. The four F-22s peeled away in a beautiful coordinated movement, their lights disappearing into the night sky. Emma felt a pang of something. Nostalgia? Regret? She wasn't sure. Gander Tower? This is Flight 437. We have the field in sight. Flight 437, Gander Tower. You are cleared for landing runway 31. Emergency equipment standing by. Wind calm. Welcome to Canada. The approach was perfect. Torres and Kim flew the aircraft with practiced skill, while Emma monitored systems and provided backup calculations. The runway appeared below them, lined with emergency vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, their lights creating a pathway of safety. The Boeing 767 touched down smoothly. The tires chirped on the runway. The thrust reversers deployed with a roar. As the aircraft rolled to a stop, the cabin erupted in applause. People were crying, hugging strangers, thanking God, thanking the pilots, thanking whoever had brought them safely to ground. Emma quietly stepped out of the cockpit and made her way back to 22C. She squeezed past the young man in 22B who was staring at her with wide eyes. "You're Valkyrie," he said. "I'm just Emma," she replied, sitting down in her middle seat. The elderly woman in 22A was awake, tears running down her face. She grabbed Emma's hand. "You saved us," she whispered. "I don't know how, but you saved us." Emma squeezed her hand gently. "The pilot saved us. I just helped with communication." But the truth was spreading through the cabin like wildfire. Passengers were whispering, pointing, taking photos with their phones. The quiet woman in 2002C, the one who had been mocked for looking at a safety card. She was Valkyrie, a military legend, a ghost come back to life. Richard Hartwell, the businessman who had humiliated her earlier, sat in his seat with his head in his hands. He didn't say anything, but his face was pale with shame. The aircraft door opened. Canadian authorities boarded, along with American military personnel. Captain Torres made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my crew, I want to thank you for your patience during our emergency. I also want to acknowledge someone who provided critical assistance tonight. The woman in seat 22C who helped us reestablish communications and coordinate our safe landing. I don't know all the details of her background, but I know we wouldn't be here without her." The cabin erupted in applause again, this time directed at Emma. She felt her face flush red. This was exactly what she had been avoiding for 3 years. Attention, recognition, being seen. But there was no escape now. Within 3 hours of landing, the story went viral worldwide. A passenger had live-streamed the F-22 escort. The video hit 10 million views by morning. News headlines screamed, "Ghost pilot emerges from hiding to save 287 lives over Atlantic." Emma watched the coverage from a secure room at Gander. Aviation experts praised her skill. News channels interviewed passengers. Social media exploded with the hashtag #Valkyrie22, see trending worldwide. Richard Hartwell's name leaked as the man who had mocked her, but he posted a public apology video that went viral itself. "I was wrong. Completely wrong," he said, his face drawn with emotion. "I judged her based on appearances. Then she saved my life. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be better." The Battle of Gray Zone became public knowledge. Military veterans shared stories about Valkyrie online. Squadron families spoke publicly, grateful to finally know the truth. The president issued a statement thanking her. Airlines offered positions. Publishers wanted book deals. But Emma remained in that quiet room, watching it unfold with detachment. She didn't want fame. She just wanted to help. Sarah Chen, the flight attendant, found her there. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked. "I'm not sure," Emma admitted. "This is overwhelming. The passengers are asking to see you. Not for photos or autographs, they just want to say thank you." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Sarah led her to a larger waiting area, where about 60 passengers from the flight had gathered. When Emma entered, they stood and applauded. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. These weren't strangers anymore. They were people she had helped keep alive. People who had shared one of the most terrifying experiences of their lives. The elderly woman from 22A came forward first. She hugged Emma tightly. You gave me more time with my grandchildren. Thank you. A businessman from first class approached. I run a foundation that supports veteran programs. I'd like to make a donation in your squadron's name. Honor the pilots who died at Gray Zone. A mother with two young children stepped forward. My kids were terrified, but when they saw you stay calm, they calmed down too. You showed them what courage looks like. One by one, passengers thanked her. Some hugged her, some shook her hand, some just looked at her with gratitude in their eyes. And slowly, Emma began to understand something. This wasn't about being a hero. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about the simple fact that she had been in the right place at the right time with the right skills, and she had used those skills to help. That was enough. That had to be enough. When the last passenger had spoken, Emma stood before the group. Thank you all for your kindness, she said quietly, but I want to be clear about something. I'm not special. I just had training that was relevant to our situation. The real heroes were Captain Torres and First Officer Kim, who kept that aircraft under control. The flight attendants who kept everyone calm, and all of you who trusted us to get you home safely. You're too humble, someone called out. Emma shook her head. I'm honest. We all played a part in surviving that night. We all got through it together. As the crowd dispersed, Richard Hartwell approached. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I judged you based on appearances, and I was completely wrong. You saved my life tonight, and I repaid your expertise with humiliation. I'm going to be better. Thank you for giving me the chance. Emma studied him for a moment. She could see genuine remorse in his face, real understanding of what he had done. We all make mistakes, she said finally. The question is what we do after. You're already doing the right thing, taking responsibility, trying to grow. That takes courage too. Richard's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Emma extended her hand. He shook it, holding on perhaps a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to memorize this moment of grace he didn't deserve, but was receiving anyway. The passengers were kept at Gander International for debriefing. It was standard procedure for any emergency landing, but this situation was complicated by the military involvement. Emma found herself in a private room with Captain Torres, First Officer Kim, and two American military officers who had flown in specifically to meet her. One was Colonel James Mitchell from Air Force One. The other was Major General Patricia Hayward, commander of the Air National Guard. Emma Reed, General Hayward said, reading from a file. Formerly Captain Emma Reed, call sign Valkyrie, 1st Special Operations Wing. Officially listed as KIA 3 years ago following the Battle of Gray Zone. Except you're clearly not dead. Emma sat quietly. She had known this moment would come. I retired, she said simply. You faked your death and disappeared, Colonel Mitchell corrected, but his tone wasn't harsh. We looked for you, Emma. A lot of people wanted to know what happened. My squadron died, Emma said, her voice flat. 8 pilots, my friends. Dead because they stayed to protect Eagle One while I played decoy. I completed the mission. The president landed safely. But the cost was too high, so I left. You saved the President of the United States, General Hayward said. You flew through enemy fire for 6 hours. You single-handedly held off an entire air wing. That's not failure. That's the definition of success. Success would have been everyone coming home, Emma said. The room fell silent. Then Colonel Mitchell pulled out his phone and showed Emma a photo. It was a memorial wall at the Air Force Academy. 8 names carved in stone. Her squadron. We built this 2 years ago, he said. Every cadet that walks by learns their names, learns what they did. They're remembered, Emma. They're honored. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I should have been there for the dedication. You were dead, remember? Mitchell said gently. But you're not dead now. And those families deserve to know what really happened. They deserve to hear it from you. Emma wiped her eyes. I don't know if I can face them. You just saved 287 people, General Hayward said. You can do hard things. There was a knock on the door. A young Air Force lieutenant entered, looking nervous. Ma'am, there are about 40 passengers outside who are refusing to leave until they can thank the woman who saved them. Emma closed her eyes. Tell them I'm not a hero. With respect, ma'am, the lieutenant said. They disagree. General Hayward stood up. Emma, you have a choice. You can slip out the back door and disappear again. We'll help you. new identity, clean break, or you can walk out there and accept that you made a difference. Emma sat in silence for a long moment. Then she stood up. Let's go meet them. Emma, we're not here to drag you back into service, but we need to know what you want. Tonight's incident is going to make the news. Your identity is going to come out. You can't go back to being invisible. Emma closed her eyes. She had known that too. 3 years of carefully constructed anonymity gone in one night. What happens now? She asked. That's up to you, General Hayward said. We can help you maintain some privacy if that's what you want. Put out a statement saying you prefer to remain out of the public eye. Most of the military details can stay classified. Or, Emma asked, or you could come back, Colonel Mitchell said quietly. Not to active combat duty, but training, teaching. The next generation of pilots needs people like you, people who can do what you did tonight. Emma thought about the young pilots in the F-22s. Razor One and his wingmen. They had called her ma'am with genuine respect. She thought about Torres and Kim, experienced pilots who had still needed help when their systems failed. She thought about the 287 passengers who had made it safely to ground. I need time to think, she said finally. Fair enough, General Hayward stood up. Take all the time you need. But Emma, what you did tonight mattered. You saved lives. Again, that's worth something. After the military officers left, Captain Torres stayed behind. I just wanted to say thank you, he said. I've been flying for 22 years. Tonight was the first time I thought I might not make it home to my family. You changed that. Emma nodded. You would have figured it out. Maybe, Torres said, but a lot faster and safer with you there. Whatever you decide to do next, I hope you know you made a difference. After Torres left, Emma sat alone in the room. She pulled out her phone. She had 147 missed messages, most from numbers she didn't recognize. News media, aviation websites, people who had already figured out her identity. But one message stood out. It was from Richard Hartwell, the businessman who had mocked her. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I judged you based on appearances, and I was completely wrong. You saved my life tonight, and I repaid your expertise with humiliation. I'm going to be better. Thank you for giving me the chance. Emma stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed a simple reply. Apology accepted. We all deserve second chances. 3 days later, Emma stood in front of a classroom at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. 40 pilot candidates sat before her, young men and women at the beginning of their careers. They knew who she was now. Everyone knew. The story had gone viral. She was humiliated in 2002. Then the sky froze when Air Force One heard her call sign, was the headline on every news site. Video from passengers on the flight had spread across social media, blurry shots of the F-22 escort, audio recordings of her radio communications, interviews with Captain Torres praising her expertise. Emma Reed, the invisible woman in the middle seat, had become Valkyrie again, but this time she wasn't running from it. Good morning, she said to the class. My name is Emma Reed. Call sign Valkyrie, and I'm here to teach you about something that doesn't show up in your flight manuals. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation. I'm here to teach you about being ready for the moment when everything goes wrong, because it will go wrong. Systems will fail. Communications will drop. You'll find yourself in situations that don't have easy answers. She paused, looking at the young faces. 3 years ago, I lost my entire squadron in combat. 8 of the best pilots I ever knew. For 3 years, I blamed myself, I hid, I tried to become someone else. Someone who didn't have to carry that weight. The room was completely silent. But here's what I learned sitting in seat 22C on that commercial flight. You can't run from who you are. You can't hide from your training. When the moment comes, when lives are on the line, you'll either be ready or you won't. She clicked to the next slide. It showed the safety card from the aircraft. I was reading this when a passenger mocked me, made fun of me for reviewing safety procedures, laughed at me for being prepared, and, for a moment, I felt ashamed, like I should apologize for being ready. She looked directly at the students. Never apologize for being prepared. Never feel ashamed for taking safety seriously. Never let anyone make you feel small for knowing your job. She clicked through more slides, showing the technical details of that night, the navigation failure, the communication breakdown. The escort coordination. This isn't about me being a hero, she said. This is about training, about preparation. about maintaining your skills even when you think you'll never need them again. She paused at a slide showing the 8 pilots from Gray Zone, her squadron, her friends. These are the pilots who died 3 years ago protecting Air Force One. I want you to know their names: Captain Marcus Webb, Lieutenant Sarah Cho, Major David Rodriguez. She went through all 8 names, told a brief story about each one. I survived because they did their jobs perfectly, she said. They sacrificed themselves so the mission could succeed. For 3 years, I felt like I didn't deserve to survive when they didn't. She looked at the class, but I learned something on that commercial flight. I learned that survival isn't about deserving. It's about responsibility. I survived for a reason: to be ready for the next moment when someone needs help, to pass on what I know to the next generation. She clicked to the final slide. So here's what I want you to take away from this. First, stay ready. Always. You never know when your training will be needed. Second, don't let fear or shame stop you from acting when the moment comes. Third, your purpose isn't about being perfect. It's about being present when you're needed. She closed her presentation. Are there any questions? A young woman in the front row raised her hand. Ma'am, how did you stay calm when everyone was panicking? Emma thought about it. I didn't feel calm. I felt terrified. But I had trained for that specific situation hundreds of times. The training took over. My body knew what to do even when my mind was scared. Another student raised his hand. What made you decide to help instead of staying in your seat? I knew I had knowledge that could save lives, Emma said simply. Once I knew that, I didn't have a choice. How could I sit there and do nothing? But you had retired, someone else pointed out. You had left all this behind. Emma nodded. I thought I had, but you don't really leave this behind. The skills, the training, the instinct to help when you can, that stays with you. I tried to bury it, but it was still there when I needed it. The questions continued for another hour. When the class finally ended, students lined up to shake her hand, to thank her, to tell her they wanted to be like her. Emma felt strange about it. She still didn't think of herself as a hero. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was showing up, being ready, helping when you could. That evening, Emma sat in a hotel room and made a phone call. Captain Torres, this is Emma Reed. Emma, how are you? I'm okay. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. How would you feel about me doing some training sessions with commercial pilots, emergency procedures, navigation backup systems, that kind of thing? There was a pause. Then, I think that would be incredible. After what happened, every pilot I know wants to learn from you. Good, Emma said, because I think I finally figured out what I'm supposed to do next. What's that? Make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to someone else. Make sure every pilot knows what to do when the systems fail. That's a good mission, Emma. Yeah, she said. I think it is. Emma Reed stood in the airport terminal at Washington Dulles. She was boarding a flight to London, the exact same route as that night 6 months ago, but this time, she wasn't in seat 22C. She was in the cockpit. After her viral rescue, several airlines had reached out with job offers, commercial pilot positions, training roles, consultant work. She had accepted a position with the airline from that fateful flight. Part-time pilot, part-time safety trainer, helping develop new emergency protocols based on her military experience. It felt right. As she walked through the terminal, several people recognized her. That's Valkyrie, someone whispered. A young girl approached nervously, her mother trailing behind. Excuse me, are you the pilot from the news? The one who saved all those people? Emma knelt down to the girl's level. I'm one of the pilots who helped, yes. I want to be a pilot too, the girl said, her eyes shining. My mom says I can be anything I want. Your mom is right, Emma said. You can be anything you work hard enough to become. Even if people laugh at me? The girl asked, and Emma could see real fear in her young eyes. Emma thought back to that night, to Richard Hartwell's mockery, to the passengers who had dismissed her. Especially if people laugh at you, Emma said firmly. The people who laugh are usually the ones who don't understand. Don't let them stop you. Use it to fuel your determination. The girl's mother smiled gratefully. Thank you. She's been talking about you non-stop since she saw you on the news. What's your name? Emma asked the girl. Sophia. Well, Sophia, I expect to see you in a cockpit someday. Promise me you'll never give up. I promise, Sophia said, beaming. Emma stood up and continued to her gate, but the interaction stayed with her. 6 months ago, she had been hiding from her past, ashamed of surviving when her squadron hadn't. Now, she was inspiring the next generation. She had visited all 8 families of her fallen squadron members. Those meetings had been the hardest thing she'd ever done, but also the most healing. Lieutenant Marcus Drake's father, Colonel Robert Drake, had been on that flight. He had helped facilitate the meetings. Each family had been grateful to finally know the truth about what had happened, about the sacrifice, about the mission's importance. They didn't blame her for surviving. They thanked her for honoring their loved ones by telling their story. She had even reconnected with Richard Hartwell. He had meant his apology, had donated a significant amount to veteran pilot training programs, had become an advocate for respecting expertise over assumptions. People could change. Emma had learned that. She had changed too. As she entered the cockpit and began her pre-flight checks, she thought about how much had changed in 6 months. The military had officially brought her back as a reserve officer. She did training seminars twice a month at the Air Force Academy, teaching young pilots about crisis management, about staying ready, about the responsibility that came with their skills. The FAA had created a new training protocol based on her recommendations. Every commercial pilot would now receive enhanced training in backup navigation systems and emergency military coordination. 3 major airlines had adopted her safety review procedures, making them mandatory for all pilots before international flights. Her story had sparked a national conversation about respecting expertise and not judging people by appearances. Schools were using it as a teaching moment about assumptions and humility. She was no longer hiding, no longer ashamed, no longer trying to be invisible. She was Valkyrie and Emma Reed, both at once, and she was exactly where she needed to be. The captain for tonight's flight climbed into the left seat. Captain Sarah Chen, the former flight attendant from that fateful night. She had decided to pursue her pilot's license after seeing Emma in action, and Emma had personally mentored her through the accelerated training program. Ready for another trip across the Atlantic? Sarah asked with a smile. Emma grinned, always ready. As the passengers boarded, Emma watched them settle into their seats. Business travelers typing on laptops. Families wrangling children. Students excited about studying abroad, all of them trusting that the people in the cockpit would get them safely to their destination. It was a sacred responsibility, one that Emma would never take lightly again. Among the passengers boarding tonight was a familiar face, the elderly woman from 22A on that fateful flight, Mrs. Eleanor Morrison. She had kept in touch with Emma, sending cards and emails, always checking in. Emma stepped out of the cockpit briefly to greet her. Mrs. Morrison, you're on this flight? The elderly woman smiled warmly. I fly this route once a month to visit my daughter in London. When I saw you were listed as first officer, I specifically requested this flight. It's good to see you, Emma said genuinely. You know, dear, I've been thinking about that night, Mrs. Morrison said. Everyone focuses on the dramatic rescue, the military jets, the heroic reveal. But I remember something else. What's that? I remember how you looked when that awful man mocked you. You could have argued with him, could have told everyone who you really were, but you didn't. You stayed quiet. You stayed humble, even when you were being humiliated. Emma nodded slowly. I was trying to hide. No, Mrs. Morrison said. You were demonstrating real strength. Strength isn't about proving yourself to people who don't matter. It's about being ready when people who do matter need you. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for that. You've inspired my granddaughter, you know, Mrs. Morrison continued. She's applying to the Air Force Academy next year. She says she wants to be like Valkyrie. What's her name? Sophia Morrison. Emma's breath caught. Wait, the little girl from earlier, in the terminal? That was my granddaughter, yes. We planned that. She wanted to meet you, but was too nervous to approach on her own. Emma laughed, wiping her eyes. You're sneaky, Mrs. Morrison. I'm old. I'm allowed to be sneaky. Emma hugged her gently. Tell Sophia I meant what I said. I expect to see her in the cockpit someday. Emma returned to the cockpit as the final passengers boarded. Among them was a young Air Force lieutenant in civilian clothes. He approached the cockpit door and asked to speak with the pilots. Emma recognized him. Lieutenant James Rodriguez, the son of Major David Rodriguez, one of her squadron members who had died at Gray Zone. Ma'am, he said, saluting, I just wanted to say thank you for visiting my family, for telling us the truth about my father, My mother has found peace for the first time in 3 years. Emma's throat tightened. Your father was a hero, Lieutenant. He saved the president's life. I know that now, Rodriguez said, and I'm following in his footsteps. I start fighter training next month. He'd be proud. I hope so, ma'am, and I hope someday I'm half the pilot he was. Half the pilot you are. After he returned to his seat, Sarah looked at Emma. Does that happen often? More than you'd think, Emma said. The families of my squadron. Other pilots who know the story, people who want to thank me for something I still struggle to accept credit for. You saved 287 people, Emma. You have to accept that you're a hero. I did my job, Emma said. Anyone with my training would have done the same. But they didn't have your training, Sarah pointed out. They didn't have your courage. You were the only person on that plane who could have done what you did. And you did it, even though it meant revealing a past you'd been hiding from for 3 years. The aircraft pushed back from the gate, taxied to the runway. The familiar routine that Emma had once thought she'd never do again. As they took off into the night sky, climbing through the darkness toward cruising altitude, Emma looked out at the lights of Washington, D.C. spreading below them. Somewhere down there were people she had saved, people she had inspired, people whose lives had been changed by one emergency flight over the Atlantic. And somewhere up here, in the darkness and stars, were the spirits of 8 pilots who had died protecting others. Emma silently promised them, as she did every time she flew, that their sacrifice hadn't been in vain. She would continue to train the next generation, continue to improve safety protocols, continue to show up when she was needed. Not because she was a hero, but because she had answered when she was called. And that, she had finally learned, was enough. The Boeing 767 leveled off at 37,000 feet, and Emma Reed, once invisible in seat 22C, now flew with purpose toward whatever came next.